Welcome back to the 31 Days of Halloween. I'm celebrating the Halloween season by doing. I heard about this. It's called the 31 Days of or Nights of Halloween, where you take every day in October leading up to Halloween, celebrating it with a horror movie every day, and that's what I'm doing. I have a huge stack, a shelf of horror movies and vampire movies, and I definitely have 31 of them. So I'm doing this. I'm celebrating this, and hopefully you enjoy the ride too. And maybe you get inspired to watch a horror movie that you have yet to see. Today we are focusing on 1983's The Hunger, starring Catherine Deneuve, David Bowie, and Susan Sarandon. This was directed by Tony Scott, the famous Tony Scott, the brother of Ridley Scott, and this was literally his first major film release. And it starts off almost like a rock video, and with Bela Lugosi's "Dead" by Bauhaus, and coming into the discotheque, and then we were introduced to our vampire couple of Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie, two people that are definitely just a little bit too old to be in the club, this club after midnight or in the early morning, but it's a total new wave club where they're looking to actually, get their human victims. And then it changes gears and it gets very thoughtful with very long shots and with classical music, especially Franz Schubert's Piano Trio Number 2, which is used all throughout the movie. And I recognized it because this was a major musical cue from Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, one of my favorite all-time movies. I didn't grow up watching this. I've only seen it a few times growing up, but because it's David Bowie movies. David Bowie movies are a subgenre onto themselves, but this is a magnificent vampire movie, and I'm going to use something you're going to hear this come up enough, especially talking about vampire movies. You're going to hear it a few more times during the series. Gay coding and queer theory. I mean, don't be afraid of it. Sexuality has a lot to do with vampire movies, especially in this one, because in 1983 it wasn't very mainstream to have the entire Act 2 and Act 3 be about a lesbian relationship. And also showing the inherent nature of vampires who want a mate to be with for an extended period of time that they make into another vampire. There's a huge allegory for what we call brooming. Seriously, now use your imagination on that one. I'm going to call it brooming, all right? So there's definitely a teenage girl who's a victim. It's a vampire movie. It's all about victims, and teenagers are fair game in horror movies. Look at Friday the 13th. Look at Halloween. Look at Nightmare on Elm Street. These are all high school students. You know what I mean? Young people becoming victims of the maniacal killer. Well, there is a part where Catherine Deneuve, she's the eternal one, while her lovers, there's a caveat to their powers. And it's really well done that eventually they will age rapidly and they will live forever, but they will be basically mummies. So by the end of it, we have all of Catherine Deneuve's past lovers that she keeps in coffins in her attic, who are in somewhat still undead and hunger, and none of their hunger can't satiate them. Their hunger can't keep them young anymore. And so it kind of intersects mummy movies and haunted house movies by the end. And it's got a great, as always, there's a great twist at the end as well. You didn't see that coming. And it's been a while since I've seen this movie. Catherine Deneuve was almost 40 years old when this movie released, and she was the French ingenue of the 60s, and one of the most beautiful women in cinema. David Bowie was in his mid to late 30s, and Susan Sarandon was in her early to mid 30s, and so you have these subjects for being photographed of just at a beautiful age, and they were so photogenic, and it was so sensual, and so there is a lot of sexuality in here, and it's also about, you know, how the brooming part, like there was like, you know, like I said, the teenage girl who was coming to them for music lessons, and she was actually being broomed by Catherine Deneuve in order to replace Bowie when Bowie eventually succumbs to the weight of his time and will age out. Yeah, I mean, there's something really intrinsic to be unpacked there in this movie. Also, the subversive nature of the vampire kind of powers. They don't have fangs. You can see them in mirrors, and they can be photographed. And you know, they drink blood, and they're eternal. They don't turn into bats, yet they will turn into mummies. There's a lot to do with ancient Egyptian stuff. And what a wonderful movie. Wow, it's so wonderfully new wave. New wave is a specific movement of fashion and music of the late 70s and early 1980s. And this documents it. And also, there's a lot of imagery with moody imageries. Remember, Ridley Scott is Tony Scott's brother. And what did Ridley Scott just make? He just made Blade Runner. He was shooting it in 81. It was released in 82. And this movie, The Hunger, was released in 83. So once again, we're confronted with images of doves, of white pigeons. And some... I don't know if it's interrelated. I think maybe Ridley, Tony was doing something visually to honor his brother. Because this was Tony Scott's first big movie as well. He went on his next movie, something you might have heard of, 1986 Top Gun. And then in 87, he did Beverly Hills Cop 2. In 1990, he did Revenge, which is this really flashy movie with Kevin Costner, Madeline Stowe, and Anthony Quinn. That was a pretty interesting movie. He also did Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise, the NASCAR movie. He did The Last Boy Scout, True Romance, Crimson Tide, The Fan, Enemy of the State, Spy Game, the remake of Man on Fire, and Domino with Keira Knightley. And he did the remake of Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 with Denzel Washington and John Travolta. And he unfortunately came to... he self-deleted in this life. And that was... August 19th, 2012. He jumped from a bridge. And... but his brother's still around, and his brother's still making decent movies. And so Tony Scott will, live forever through his work. Unironically, but this is a vampire movie, and this was a really interesting vampire movie. I'm so happy that I went back and watched this. I'm so happy that I'm celebrating the 31 days of Halloween. We're going to be watching a horror movie, covering a horror movie every day during the month of October, leading up until Halloween. And Halloween, I'll reveal my favorite all-time horror movie. And it's in season of it, too, and a celebration of the season as well, culturally, for me. But yeah, so this has been, The Hunger. Yeah, I'm trying to do the Bruce Lee thing. Oh, yeah. Forgot the shades. So, yeah. What? Yeah, The Hunger. And this has been a really good movie. It's about 98 minutes long, so you got 3 solid acts, almost a half an hour each. Really good makeup, the practical effects, and the aging effects, all done in makeup. These days, we have what is it, the FaceTime thing, or these de-aging things, or aging filters we have that are computer generated. This is all old school, and it's a really tonally interesting movie. It's very moody. It's very sexy. And like I said, there's an on-screen lesbian relationship between Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon. And just Susan Sarandon is topless a lot. And what a beautiful lady. And just, wow. I'm just sorry. Not sorry. But thank you so much. It's October 5th. We're talking about the 31 days of Halloween. And yeah, I'm going to be doing I'm going to be watching a horror movie every night. Some of them I'm going to double up on so I can have my weekends free. So I do shoot the show around that and around that notion. But I am watching all these movies. I've seen them before, and I'm watching them this time. And I'm watching them all, even though there are going to be a few that I've never seen before as well. Looking forward to covering that. But consider this as our start to vampire movies, because I have a lot of vampire movies. I'm saving my favorite ones for the last week of the show, and there are at least more than a few vampire movies, and the best of the best at the end of the series. When the closer we get to Halloween itself. Yeah, so this is Tony Scott's 1983 vampire movie. This moody masterpiece of frantic, kinetic, modernity, balanced with classical notes and long shots and breezy things. Like, you know, at the beginning of Susan Sarandon and or Beth and Catherine Deneuve, Miriam's relationship, it's like every time that they're in the seduction scene, you see these flowers that are in bloom, these big lilacs, and they're just, all I can get are these Georgia O'Keeffe, visuals of art, because in every Georgia O'Keeffe painting is smuggled in the yonic or the onyxial. What is yonic? What is onyxial? That is the female comparison to the male phallic. Yeah, that's it. So imageries of flowers, of open flowers opening. This is all very yonic. So I'm glad to see all this within this really good movie. And I'm glad that and I'm so happy that you tuned in today. Thank you so very much. You are the most important part of this show. Having this conversation right now, talking about this. We're doing the 31 days of Halloween. We are watching 31 horror movies, all up until, you guessed it, the 31st of Halloween. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless. Namaste. Good luck. Wear and eat plenty of garlic, and you know what? Don't let the wrong one in, huh? Oh my goodness, I can't see my cursor with these things on. There we go. You have a good night. See you later. Bye-bye.